Right, great. We'll get started now. Good morning, everyone. I'm Chris Knopp, the Executive Director of Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness, and it's great to join all of you on World Water Day. And it's great to have the panelists here with me. I'll introduce them here. We have Senator Sen McEwen from Duluth, Representative Kelly Morrison from Deep Haven, Amanda Koehler from the Land Stewardship Project, and our policy director, Scott Beauchamp, is with us as well. He's the policy director here at the Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness. Well, World Water Day, this is a day that was established by the United Nations 29 years ago. And water has a special meaning for me as the executive director of Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness. The wilderness area covers over 1 million acres, 1,000 lakes, countless rivers and streams. And we here in Minnesota are at the point of 3 watersheds. The Lake Superior watershed, which hosts the greatest of the Great Lakes and has 10% of the world's surface fresh water, the Mississippi River watershed, and the Hudson Bay River watershed. So Minnesota is really central to that. And as my colleagues know, I am from Cleveland, Ohio, which on June 22nd, 1969 caught fire. And as my fellow Clevelanders like to think, is the birthplace of the Clean Water Act. So clean water is really, really essential. And water is not just surface water, as Amanda Koehler from the Land Stewardship Project will also talk about. It also has to do with groundwater. And so the threats to water are not just surface, but also groundwater. And we need to think of the issue of protecting water comprehensively. Here at Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness, we have been working to stop 2 copper sulfide mines, which would pollute 2 watersheds, the Lake Superior watershed with polymet, and the Hudson Bay River watershed with twin metals. And we've been successful in stopping those through the courts, but it's also important to have legislative protection in order to enshrine that protection permanently, both at the state and federal level. And so I am going to kick this off, kind of a roundtable discussion. And before we do that, I want to let our participants know that you may add questions in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen there, or comments in the chat tab there. So I am going to start this off with Senator McEwen and Representative Kelly Morrison talking a little bit about the threat that copper sulfide mining presents to Lake Superior and the Boundary Waters, Rainy River watershed. So maybe I'll start with Senator McEwen. Why don't you talk about the work that you've been doing to protect Lake Superior from copper sulfide mining?
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and thanks everybody for having us today. This is really nice to get together on such a special day to talk about all of the work that we're doing to protect our clean water in Minnesota. And you know, as Chris just said it so well, I mean, we're the state of clean water. We are the center of the some of the cleanest water that still exists really in the world. And we have these multiple watersheds in Minnesota. And I represent the city of Duluth in the state Senate. I'm in my first term representing our community. And my work at the state Senate has really come out of the work my community has been doing around trying to protect Lake Superior and the St. Louis River watershed from the threat of the polymet mine, and also the threat of the development of that particular type of mining just upstream from us and from our community. So living in Duluth, I think all Duluthians really share this ethic of we live on the greatest body of fresh water in the world. We see it every day when we leave our houses and we go to work and we're out on walks. You can turn your head. Duluth is on a hill, so it's a beautiful city right on the lake. And you can look out and you see that gorgeous expanse of blue stretching out to the horizon. And you do feel like you're on a coast. You're on an inland coast. And we take tremendous pride in the health of that body of water, not just for our own selfish reasons, but certainly that's part of it. The water is the base for our economy. It is the base for our public health. It's the basis of everything that Duluth is built on. So it's truly a point of pride for us to be caretakers of that water and to make sure that it is protected. Is coming into the state Senate, I've been really proud to author a number of bills to protect our water, some to protect it from the threat of copper sulfide mining and other measures as well. We have some PFAS legislation and legislation to address lead pipes, all sorts of different issues that we're working on in regard to clean water with colleagues, including Representative Morrison. Just really proud of the work we're doing. We're at a critical moment right now. All of us know with the climate crisis upon us, and we're seeing this in committees at the legislature right now as well. Some of the instances where individual communities are facing some water crises really because of the climate crisis due to flooding, droughts, things like that, and they're trying to mitigate. And then they're trying to build, trying to find solutions locally for these problems. So we really are on the cusp of having to do some big, large-scale work and planning to make sure that we shore up the clean water that we have in our state, and that we also look toward making improvements to the damage that has been done in recent decades as well, to try to make things better. So I'm really proud of the work that we're doing. There's a lot of work ahead, and I'm just so pleased to be doing it with all of you and in coalition with my community and with your communities. So look forward to what's to come.
Great, thank you, Senator McEwen, and Representative Morrison, who's a physician, and I know spent some time in residency at the Cleveland Clinic, so you're familiar with the challenges in Cleveland. But as a health expert, you also know the importance to public health, and you've been a leader in the issue to protect our waters from copper sulfide mining and thinking about long-term planning for protecting our water. So, Kelly Morrison, if you'd please provide your perspectives on World Water Day here.
Well, thank you, Chris, and I am so glad to join all of you today. I'm wearing my blue scarf in honor of our sky blue waters on World Water Day, and I'm so proud to partner with the Friends and with Senator McEwen on several pieces of significant legislation, we hope, to protect our waters. I'm really proud to partner with all of you. I was thinking, Chris, during your introduction, that we do share a couple of things, one being a love of the Boundary Waters. My family and I go to the Boundary Waters every year. It's an endemic part of our family lore and tradition, and it's a sacred place to all of us, as it is to millions of Americans and people from all over the world. And then, of course, your reference to Cleveland. I went to medical school, as you said, in Cleveland. I actually went to Case Western Reserve, which is affiliated with the Cleveland Clinic's rival university hospitals and metro hospitals. But I met my husband there. And so Cleveland is special to me. And it is always fighting to no longer be known as the mistake on the lake, right? But also, most importantly, thinking of itself as part of the reason for the Clean Water Act, which is wonderful. So there is so much work to do. The threat of copper sulfide mining to our state and to our waters is significant. And we are up against some very powerful actors who will do everything they can to make this happen. So there are several pieces of legislation that we've been working on in order to protect the health of Minnesotans, the wildlife and the water here, and frankly, the taxpayers, our economy. There are sort of counterintuitive arguments made in favor of copper sulfide mining that would indicate that this would be a net positive for our economy, when in fact it would be devastating to the state of Minnesota. So the Prove It First legislation we've talked about a lot. That's just simply asking these companies that come from across the world to take our resources, that they prove that they can mine and then close a mine operate a mine for 10 years and then close it for 10 years without polluting. And as we all know, that has never been done. should be alarming to all of us, but it's a pretty simple ask for these high stakes mines. If they want to come here and do that, then they should be able to prove that they can protect our water and our people first. Moving promotion of mining from DNR to deed is important. DNR is, if you go to the DNR website, you'll see on its first page, one of its mission is the promotion of mining. And that's an inherent conflict of interest and contradiction in what its mission should be. So we're working to move that out of DNR's jurisdiction. I'm also authoring the Boundary Waters Permanent Protection Act, which would permanently protect the watershed on state land from non-ferrous mining, which would provide permanent protection. It's the companion bill to Betty McCollum's federal bill to protect the boundary waters from this kind of mining. We have a couple of other bills in the works, and later today I will be presenting in committee our plan to fund a study to create a water plan for the state of Minnesota so that we can ensure that we have adequate clean water for the next 50 years. Very excited about this effort. I think we'll talk more about that later, but just really happy to be here and to celebrate World Water Day with all of you and to have this important conversation.
Thank you, Representative Morrison, for your comments there. And as you said, Cleveland has been known as the mistake on the lake, and one of the mistakes, the big mistake, is taking its water resources for granted. And we don't want to make a mistake on Lake Superior or a mistake on the boundary waters here. So we want here in Minnesota not to repeat the mistakes that others have made here. When looking at water protection, we really also need to look at groundwater and the contamination that the threat to groundwater presents. And Amanda Koehler from the Land Stewardship Project can provide her expertise in that. So Amanda, if you would talk a bit about the threat to groundwater here.
Sure, thank you, Chris. And I'm really excited to be invited here today because I work with farmers and rural Minnesotans primarily. I'm the policy manager for the Land Stewardship Project. And when we think about what is ahead of us, we really think about creating economic development that's good for people and the land. And that has to do with mining, that has to do with agriculture. We don't have to trade off, we can do both. So I'm here really to speak to a lot of those threats that come directly from agriculture. And there are a lot of them, but there's also a ton of opportunities to be building resiliency and clean our water. I would say the three top challenges presented to our groundwater and, as well as our surface water from agriculture would be water infiltration, water quality, and water quantity. So the way that that industrial ag has led us is that we're essentially mining out the health of our soil. And what that does is turn fields into like dirt slabs instead of these spongy ecosystems that soak up water and kind of self-sustain. And so that's, water is just running right off, and that causes erosion. So we're losing soil. It's running off with chemicals. Which is expensive. It's expensive not only to be putting chemicals on fields, but then to be losing it and having to clean it out of our water, and then causing flooding. And we're seeing more and more flooding, more and more drought, and it's expensive. It's expensive to be addressing that damage that we're seeing. We're seeing water quantity issues around, industrial agriculture takes up a lot of water, especially when the soil won't soak it up. And when we have large-scale systems like factory farming. A couple of years ago, I worked on a campaign with folks in southeastern Minnesota to stop a 5,000 head factory hog farm that would have used more water than the entire county. And we did stop it, but there are many of them out there. And, when it comes to that as well, when we're focused on efficiency, which means, putting that efficiency above really what's healthy for people and what's healthy for our water, we're polluting our water with excessive amounts of factory farm manure, which is actually just different than normal livestock manure that's just being naturally dropped around by grazing livestock. We're putting a lot of fertilizer, a lot of pesticides that impact human health and also the health of our wildlife and the critters that our soil really depends on. So this is a huge issue when it comes to not just water quality, but climate change, human health, our local economies, the sheer cost of all of this, of cleaning our water, of dumping in chemicals that are just going to wash away, and to try to create fake fertility in the soil and cleaning up the flood damage. It's a big challenge, but there's a lot we can do about it. Do you want me to talk about that, Chris, or
sure? I'd like you to expand on a couple comments. One, you were talking about this sort of hidden costs of that ag runoff, and I know in Iowa, the city of Des Moines has incurred a lot of expenses in its sewage treatment plant trying to deal with that. Why don't you expand on that hidden cost of trying to deal with that ag runoff in our rivers and streams?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's particularly challenging for rural communities because they don't have as many resources, frankly, especially when, the tax base is just smaller and their systems are not built for their human they're built for their human ecosystem, not for their human and like factory farms and all the, runoff that's happening. So the costs really do land usually through property taxes, which I think a lot of folks would agree are not the most equitable way of dealing with, the challenges that we're facing, but the kind of the ways to deal with all these challenges, and I know I personally find as a young person, I find it hard sometimes to get past what the challenges are and look at the solutions, but I see a lot of things changing. And one of those things is there's these 5 principles of soil health that farmers are really moving towards adopting. And there's, multiple farmer to farmer networks across the state. And we're advancing on legislation to really supplement that cultural change. And those principles are, armoring the soil. So growing plants and plant residue to protect from erosion and evaporation, reduce compacting the soil. So really trying to avoid having soil bare at all throughout the year. Minimizing the disturbance, so minimizing overgrazing, tillage, using too many chemicals, plowing, wanting to increase plant diversity. So trying to mimic kind of what Mother Nature does, right? Like it's not natural to have one crop for like fields and fields and fields. So really having at least 3 crops in a mix and doing rotations to have a functional soil food web. Keeping, those living roots in the soil year round, which can be done with perennial crops or with cover crops, which are more and more popular. And then the last one really is integrating livestock onto the land because, animal, plants, and soils have long been acting in a synergistic way to build enough organic matter to be self-sustaining. The system is supposed to be self-sustaining. We just have messed with it enough that it's not anymore. And really trying to get livestock onto the land in a way that you are spreading nutrients evenly, and plants and soils are, given disturbance and rest in healthy amounts. So really avoiding factory farming and also avoiding, overgrazing at the same time.
Great, thank you, Amanda, for your comments there. Representative Morrison, as you alluded to, there will be a hearing on legislation that you've introduced in the House and that Senator McEwen's introduced in the Senate, and it's legislation to provide a long-term water plan for the state of Minnesota. Would you talk about the importance of long-term planning as part of responsible governance for the state of Minnesota for water?
Absolutely. I think we're just at a critical moment in terms of water. There are so many threats to it, as we've already kind of elucidated, and Amanda did such a fantastic job explaining the challenges that agriculture brings and the solutions that are available. It's exciting to hear her talk. In this era of accelerating climate change and increasing water scarcity, here we are in Minnesota with Lake Superior, the Boundary Waters, the land of 10,000 lakes, the land of sky blue waters. We sometimes, I think, take our water for granted. We assume there will always be abundant, clean water here. And increasingly, that's not the case. I thought it was interesting that Amanda alluded to water quantity being a concern here in Minnesota. Our neighbor state, Michigan, a fellow Great Lakes state, has been faced with challenges of water quantity and quality. And we need to use that as a cautionary tale. And so really the bill is pretty simple. It just calls for performing a study to create a plan, a comprehensive plan for the state that identifies threats and creates a plan of action to ensure that there is adequate clean water for the next 50 years. We have to look at this through a comprehensive lens where we take all threats into account in one place. We tend to fragment the problems and address them individually. We need to look at this in a comprehensive way. So I'm very excited that it will be heard in the Higher Education Committee this afternoon in the House. And I'm super grateful as ever to Senator McEwen for carrying the effort in the Senate.
Great, thank you, Representative Morrison. And it's been dropped in the chat by our colleague Maya Swope here, where you can contact your legislators to support the legislation that Representative Morrison and Senator McEwen have introduced to provide that long-term water plan for Minnesota here. And for those of us out there that may think, hey, we are the land of 10,000 lakes, sky blue water, that we don't have to worry about this. Just think of the state of Texas that looks at itself as the energy state. A year and 15 months ago had an energy crisis, and so here we are, the state of water, as Senator McEwen said. We cannot take what we have for granted here, and we really do need that long-term plan in place for water quality, water quantity, as Amanda said. And so the Water Council at the University of Minnesota provides a substantive forum where we have real expertise at the University of Minnesota, our land grant flagship university here, where you have that intellectual heft and that independence to really lay out that long-term plan. And that's what the land grant colleges, such as University of Minnesota, have the expertise to do and to provide for the state. So that we look at, and I really applaud Representative Morrison and Senator McEwen for taking that long-term view that's not dependent upon a 2-year or 4-year election cycle, but is one that looks at a generational cycle here. And so, Senator McEwen, you grew up on a Great Lake here, and you spoke so eloquently about your experience in Duluth there. I mean, Duluth has really had a renaissance in recent decades, and a lot of it is focused on clean water and respecting clean water. Could you talk a little bit about how the future and the economic future is intertwined with a clean future and clean water?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for that question, Chris. It is, and there's a question in the chat too. Sorry, I'm trying to think about both of these, but I actually, I am thinking about this idea, when we talk about that water is life. Water is quite literally life. It is in our bodies. It is the foundation for our existence on the planet, for the existence of the planet itself. It is life. And there's sort of different levels of that. There's sort of a deep spiritual level to that, and a sort of identity and ethic around that. And then there's also more immediate needs levels, like we're talking about the basics for our economy. And in Duluth, we have seen this shift. And I think that my presence in the Senate is perhaps some evidence of that shift in thinking, that when people are living on a lake like Lake Superior, and we've had some good leadership locally to try, and there's more work to be done to connect the city more intimately with the lake so that it's very accessible for people to be there, and we don't have freeways right along the lake or something like that, separating people. But the recognition that if we lay out our cities and if we have interaction with our bodies of water that is really more holistic, more recognizing our connection to our deep connection and our immediate economic connection to this lake and to the waters where we live, that can have just tremendous benefits in healing those divisions. And we've seen over past decades, you know, we've inherited this situation right now where we're in the inheritors of this sort of manifest destiny kind of attitude, this colonial dominance attitude toward natural resources, toward water. And you see that reflected in our laws. You know, there's a sort of sense, and I saw it reflected in a committee hearing just yesterday, in fact, in the Legacy Committee, this sort of approach to development as a sort of, well, of course, we have to bring industry and as much industry as possible into our areas. And the only sort of thing we have to do is make sure that the pollution that the industry is obviously going to cause is not going to be just, we're going to try to control it a little bit. And so there's this assumption that any mining proposal, of course, deserves to be permitted. Any kind of industry proposal, of course, needs to be ushered through, and the red carpet needs to be rolled out, and it needs to be permitted. But what we're seeing, and I think it's healthy and it gives me hope, is a shift in thinking about what our economies should look like and how they should function, and what they should, how they should function, and what they should grow out of. You know, it's a sort of recognition that we are part of this. We are of this. We are of the earth. We are of our clean waters. And if we are acting in a way that is destroying the clean water in our area, destroying the natural environment, our wetlands, all of these amazing natural beauty that surrounds us and that we're a part of, at the end of the day, we are hurting ourselves. It's a sort of, it's just a very unhealthy sort of dynamic. And we're seeing it right now with the climate crisis, obviously, where we are literally destroying the planet right now. And we are not moving nearly at the rate of urgency and speed with which scientists are telling us around the world that we need to be moving. So, you know, if I have any appeal to our audience today, it is to have those tough discussions with your legislators. There's as a new legislator, one of the takeaways that I have so far is just how much pressure there is on legislators to just toe the line and walk the status quo. I mean, it is tremendous pressure. It's pressure from all of the forces at the legislature. And it's a sort of bubble that we're in St. Paul, where the money rules. I mean, really, the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, moneyed interests at the legislature, they rule the roost. And that is across party lines. It is really the culture of the Capitol. And so in as much as you can push your legislators to do what is right and to buck those forces, and the forces are internal as well. I'll be honest. I mean, it's not easy to fight against the current every single day, right? I mean, we always have to pick our battles. That's something we all do. But it is very difficult to be in the legislature fighting these fights, because it's just would be so much easier not to fight them. And I can see why some of our colleagues don't take them up, because it's tremendously difficult. So, so the more support we can get from people, having those good heart-to-hearts with your legislators, letting them know that this is your core value and that you expect them to be fighting for clean water, and you expect them to be holding up these standards for our environment, the better off we'll be. And if I could just make a quick plug on that last subject you were talking about with our bill for the water study, specifically in addition to contacting your legislators, I would ask you to please contact Senate Republican leadership, and in specifically the senator who is the lead of the Legacy and Environmental Policy Committee, Senator Kerry Rinne. She could definitely use some encouragement to hear just how important putting a plan like this together is. So Senator Kerry Rinne and the Republican leadership in the Senate are sort of the keys either to getting these things done and seeing them move, or seeing them continually held up.
Can I just jump in quickly and add thank you for all of that. It's so wonderful to listen to Senator McEwen. But contacting Senator Rinne is so important, and it speaks to how this should not be a partisan issue. And Senator McEwen referenced that we face opposition in both parties. This is a problem across parties, but the solution is nonpartisan, because as has been referenced in the chat and by Senator McEwen, water is life, and that is true regardless of your political affiliation or your background. So this is an issue that can bring Minnesota together, which we need desperately right now. We all have an interest in protecting our water. I'm trying to keep up with the chat over here. I love these webinars because there's so much wisdom and expertise in the audience and the participants. I wish we were all on the panel together. But I just wanted to, several people have brought up line 3 and groundwater. Groundwater, thank you for mentioning that. It's just a reminder that water flows where it will. Like all of these issues, it can't be compartmentalized, which is part of the reason the threat of copper sulfide mining is so great, because it will just flow. And line 3, would this bill, were it enacted with a comprehensive water plan for our future, have prevented the line 3 disaster? Most likely it would have, I think, yes.
Thank you, Representative Morrison. And there is a lot of wisdom in the chat and the Q&A function here. And one of the questions is talking about the Indigenous perspective here. And I'll put in a plug. We're having a program this evening. Among the programs that we have at Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness is our No Boundaries to the Boundary Waters program. It's an education program intended to reach students all across Minnesota and connecting students to the Boundary Waters through online programs, as well as local paddle days and scholarships for wilderness canoe trips. For our online programs and for our classroom visits, we're trying to incorporate Indigenous perspectives into our curriculum. And so we're working with the College of St. Scholastica in Duluth right now to go out to Anishinaabe elders and incorporate their stories into our curriculum. And we have a program this evening that you can participate at, a Zoom program just like this. And so we'll perhaps, Maya, if we could perhaps drop the link to that program in the chat function, or if you would reach out to us, we can provide you with information about, that's the second of 4 evening programs that we have, in which Anishinaabe elders are providing perspectives on a number of environmental topics and how they relate to the boundary water specifically, but more broadly about water is life here. One of the things that of looking at this as sort of a bipartisan issue is that what's good for the environment is also good for business. And for those of you that are watching this that might be affiliated with businesses throughout Minnesota, that I cannot begin to tell you how much the river catching fire in Cleveland hurt Cleveland's brand. And so if you are with Target or General Mills or with a small business, I can tell you your brand here in Minnesota will be hurt all across the country and around the world if you allow the boundary waters or Lake Superior to be polluted. So for those of you that have a business interest, if you're with any of the chambers of commerce here, look up, wake up, and really look at the challenge that's coming, and don't you will be rewarded financially if you protect our clean water resources. And Amanda, one of the things that you talked about was water quantity, and how in addition to the water quality and the infiltration threats there, the water quantity, and in the Northeast Metro and non-agricultural setting. We've seen White Bear Lake with a huge threat to that lake there that I'm very familiar with. And in Dakota County a few years ago, there was an effort to take water from Dakota County and export it out of the state here. But water quantities is one of those really incredibly frightening threats to our state water resources. Would you talk more about the threats to water quantity out there?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, my organization has offices in Western Minnesota and Montevideo, and in Southeastern Minnesota and Lewiston. So I'd love seeing the Winona shout out there. And I believe the community in our Western Minnesota office, like they're piping water into that community already. Like this is not something that we're thinking about in the future. Like this is something that's already happening now. And in our Southeastern Minnesota office, we can't drink the water out of the tap. So they have to, buy those coolers. Like we're already in a place where water quality and quantity is affecting our communities. And I think oftentimes we think about water being so accessible because where I live, even though I do have a lead service line, so thank you for working on that, I drink the water straight out of my tap and it flows, but it's not the same thing everywhere. So that's one of the things I think about. And I think one of the challenges is, big industries do have to get permits for their water use through the DNR, the Department of Natural Resources. I've never seen them second guess any of those permits. And so thinking about, how do we make sure we have a more comprehensive approach so that industries aren't getting water at the expense of our people and like our environment, I think is really important.
And the article that was in the Star Tribune about Michigan is really a cautionary tale, because that article focused on water quantity, and Michigan has has had Nestle and some other incredible water users that have taken that groundwater out of that state, and a lake that is surrounded by Great Lakes has water shortages within it. It's really extraordinary there. Amanda, I want to also follow up on another point that you made. You were talking about soil health here, and what legislation is out there to protect soil health here?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I also kind of want to use it to plug, like, reaching out to your legislators again. So last session, we introduced a bill that set goals for 100% soil healthy farming in Minnesota and provided grants and cost share for farmers to implement these practices. This session, we've kind of adjusted it to be acreage goals, which still adds up to 100%, but we have goals for 5.75 million acres in soil healthy farming by 2030, which is about 25%, 11.5 million acres by 2035, and 23 million acres by 2040. And then the bill this session also includes $17 million for cost share program. The governor actually, put out a $38 million proposal for soil healthy farming, which is incredible to see. We won 5.5 last session, but it's not nearly enough for 23 million acres of farmland, right? And it did pass last week out of the Environment and Natural Resources Committee in the House. But I think one thing I want to say too is the first time we had a hearing on this bill last session was in the House Ag Committee, and we went into it hoping that we'd at least get all the Democrats to vote for it. And one of our members reached out to me ahead of time. Her name's Ivy, and she said, I want to meet with my representative, Representative Anderson, who's out in Western Minnesota, Republican, about the bill. And so I gave her some information. She met with him and a couple of neighbors about it. And 2 days later, we had the hearing, and he voted yes. And because he was the minority lead on that committee, every single person in his caucus also voted yes. And we got all of the DFL and the GOP caucus members to vote yes on that. So you might think that people are you might think that your legislator might be a lost cause sometimes, whether like depending on an issue or because they're in a party that doesn't support something, but it is possible. And water is one of those things that can really unite. I door knocked Kerry Rinne's district last session about water, and it made a difference. And so I really encourage that, like, don't write them off. They do, it sometimes works. It really does sometimes work. And I saw that firsthand last session.
Well, Amanda, you raise a really good point that legislation and governance and politics, they're all participation sports, right? You need to show up and need to be involved in. And one of the things that we've been doing at Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness here is with the Prove It First legislation is reaching out to delegates of both parties that are going through the process right now. And I know we're coming up into the Senate district conventions and the political unit conventions coming up here, and so we're I'll put in a plug that we're looking for Prove It First delegates that will ask the both political parties to support the Prove It First legislation. And so those kick off this Saturday, March 26th, and continue for the next few weeks here. So you can contact any of us here at Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness. My colleague Maya Swope or Scott Beauchamp or myself here can give you more information about that. So being Prove It First delegates, that's really a stalking horse for being a clean water delegate and letting our state know that it's a bipartisan issue and an issue that all of us really need to care about. Senator McEwen here on some of the maybe you want to talk about how Duluth had been an area of concern at one time and is still an area of concern. But there has been a huge investment in cleaning up Duluth and the Duluth Superior complex here, and what that investment in as an area of concern has done for improving the quality of life really in Duluth.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there has been large scale investments, especially in the St. Louis River watershed leading down into the harbor, a lot of cleanup of the St. Louis River, because of these decades past of industry. We have some spots, especially along the St. Louis River and then into the harbor of Duluth that have become not healthy places over the years. So there has been a lot of investment there to do that cleanup, and you see more people wanting to live there, more people wanting to recreate, people out on canoes on the river, people wanting to, going bird watching, going to look for wildlife, and just enjoying those areas and being in them. Whereas before, some of those areas were toxic. So we have seen, all of these investment. That's one of the things that, I've heard Duluthians talk about is, so we're going to use all of these millions and millions of taxpayer dollars to clean up the messes made by profiteers of the past, so that we can use these areas and enjoy them again and eat the fish, hopefully, from them again, and all of this work. And we're finally there. And now we're talking about putting this copper sulfide mine and dam upstream. Are you kidding me? What are people thinking? Why is this even on the table? So yeah, it has been wonderful opportunity in Duluth, and there's housing developments happening there. It's just been a sort of renaissance in West Duluth in that area in particular. And the Canal Park area is another example. When I don't remember it, it was back in the 70s, but my parents tell me that long around the time when I was born, there were areas of Canal Park that were basically a dump. There were old cars there. It was just a sort of seedy area that wasn't well cared for. And then some city leadership decided to build the boardwalk, make it into a really accessible place for people to go down to the lake, cleaned it up, got some businesses in there, and then it really took off. And now it's like the tourist center up there is our Canal Park. So, and the boardwalk that connects that center of Duluth over. So yeah, a lot of exciting things that you can do, and a lot of economic activity that results from actually reconnecting with your natural environment after decades of degradation and misuse and abuse of the natural environment. Really exciting.
Thank you, Senator McEwen. Representative Morrison had to jump off. She serves also on the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources, and that's an important body that uses our lottery tax dollars to fund in various environmental projects. So we're glad to have someone like Representative Morrison serving on that committee. Senator McEwen, you made a really interesting observation about what Duluth has done in recent years, and it was, you know, instead of turning the back away from the lake, but actually looking at the lake as a source of investment and inspiration. And I can tell you that the cleanup of that estuary, the St. Louis estuary, it's a beautiful place to get on the water and do some paddling, and wild rice grows there now. And if something like polymet were to go through, the increased sulfate from that in our waters would kill all that wild rice.
Yeah, it's just madness. It's sort of a madness, I think, to think about trying to pursue that line of industry. You know, I can tell you, yesterday we heard this bill by one of my colleagues is trying to actually introduce a bill that would, you know, it's purportedly for more transparency, which if that was the purpose of the bill, I'm on board. That's great. I'd love to see more transparency from our agencies for different reasons. But the other parts of the bill would actually provide for more of a I would describe it as fast tracking, because it would place limits on the amount of time that our agencies could even consider. So more pressure, even more pressure on the agencies from industry, from moneyed interests to pass these things through. So we heard testimony in committee like, you know, I talked to somebody from Ohio or from North Dakota, and they told me that if this project had been introduced there, it would have been permitted years ago. And my thought was like, have you been to Ohio? Have you been to some of these places? Is this what you want for our northern Minnesota woodlands and forests? No, thank you. We're not into fast tracking our permitting. So, you know, and I think what it really speaks to is a sense by some of those forces that the times are changing, and they are really starting to feel that there is more and more of a demand from the public to have our agencies truly serving the people of the state and the interests of the people of the state, instead of what many of us have described as a sort of corporate capture that happens, where we have a back and forth between our agencies and people who are working for industry and on behalf of industry. So yeah, it is sort of interesting. I wanted to offer a comment too. I was so glad to hear, thanks Amanda for telling that story about the progress that was made when somebody spoke with their representative who you know, was a Republican who maybe at first thought you might think, oh, this is not going to be helpful, it's not going to go anywhere, but it did. It made a difference. And I love that story, because I do think that that is really the sort of the next point of where we need to be moving, or one of the places where we need to be moving, is to really get back some of those Republicans. And all of us know that the Republican Party has taken a pretty weird turn in the last, you know, 5-10 years. Things have gotten pretty strange, but I still hold out some hope and trust that we can talk to people and have some good heart-to-heart conversations and appeal to their better selves, to take leadership and to really act in a way that is in the best interest of the people, of their neighbors and the people that they represent. So if we can get some of those people to stand up and lead, and to become part of the leadership of this movement to protect the clean water and to prepare for these next decades to come, I really think that we could make some excellent progress, because it truly is a bipartisan issue. There are different approaches to how we can do this, and they can maybe have a different approach than I might, right? And we can debate what we're going to end up with. But we need everybody at least on board to make sure that that protect it, and that we're going to make sure that.
Great, thank you, Senator McEwen. Want to take off from a couple of the points that you made here, and I want to put in a plug for a report that we put together. It's Protecting Minnesota Water: Threat Assessments and Policy Recommendations. Here, it is hot off the press here, I want to thank my colleague Scott Beauchamp for leading the effort, and for Amanda Koehler for contributing to it. And this we will have on our website starting probably tomorrow or so, and will be distributed to Minnesota legislators on Thursday of this week. So this is a comprehensive look at Minnesota's waters, from the boundary waters of the Northeast to the farmlands throughout Minnesota to the metro area, looking at the threats to Minnesota waters and providing specific recommendations. And so we hope this provides a substantive basis for real action, and that water plan that will be heard in the Higher Education Committee this afternoon. I don't know if my colleague Maya Swope can provide a link to that hearing that you can participate in via Zoom. But if for those of you watching here right now, if you would send your support for that legislation to the committee chair, Representative Connie Bernardi, and the vice chair, Representative Shelley Christensen, would be great. That would be really important to get the support for having Minnesota having a 50-year long-term water plan for our state here. There are some important questions that were in comments in the Q&A and chat areas here, and I want to respond to a couple of them. One, the question is the PolyMet project still really a threat? And the answer is absolutely. We still have multiple lawsuits trying to fight PolyMet right now, and but it is still a threat out there. So thank you, Scott, for putting the link to the hearing in it. So all of you that are watching right now, please click on that link and participate in that hearing this afternoon. So thank you, Maya, for that as well. So for PolyMet, it does not have a permit, so we were successful, and I want to thank all our colleagues at the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy and Water Legacy and others, and the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, for this combined effort to stop PolyMet in the courts. But it is still a threat, and so that's why we need to prove it first legislation and our other legislation to stop that. Amanda, one of some of the issues related to ag runoff is, let's talk maybe specifically about the namesake river of our state, the Minnesota River, and what can be done to improve the water quality of the Minnesota River here.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things to do really is to help support this bill that would really ramp up our soil healthy practices in Minnesota. And I do think that this other bill, this like 50 years of clean water bill, is also extremely important. I was personally excited to see it going through the University of Minnesota, because there is so much broken trust with the agencies, frankly, of like just constantly treating not just mines as clients, but we've had the same experience with factory farms. The Pollution Control Agency has never ordered an environmental impact statement on a proposed factory farm or factory farm expansion, even though it's required by law if it poses a significant environmental impact potential. So the other thing I would say is keep pushing the administration, keep pushing these agencies to not just like follow the law that already exists, but step up and start seeing our people and our environment as who they're supposed to be serving. I think there are some good proposals out there to legislate that, but ultimately it's going to take public pressure to really get them to step up. So I think, yeah, supporting these two bills and keep pushing those public institutions.
Thank you, Amanda, there. And I know we're reaching near the end of our time here, maybe for some final comments from Senator McEwen for our audience here.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking of one thing I wanted to touch on. We have a whole list of wonderful pieces of legislation, from Prove It First to a bad actor bill to a taxpayer protection bill to a bill that separates and defines the interests of the DNR from deed and would place the mining promotion with deed. And then now this water study bill as well, and there are others, I think, as well. But we have a lot of legislation that we're trying to move. There was a question also about, like, what are the chances of actually hearing these in committee, seeing these signed into law? And I think that I would describe it as an uphill battle, absolutely. Our best chance of hearing these bills, and we have a hearing actually in the House on the water study bill, is in the House. It is with those efforts trying to move things forward in the House. We have also tried to push for, at the very least, an informational hearing in the House for the Prove It First legislation, just so that we could really air this out and have some good testimony and information for the public about the threat of copper sulfide mining. So we have a bigger conversation about this. And I don't know where that's at this point. But, you know, as we've talked about during this webinar, the sort of the fights to move this type of legislation is occurring within both parties. It's not partisan in that way, although certainly it's more uphill with the Republicans, perhaps. But in the Republican Senate, it's very tough. Just to get the bills even heard in a committee. I was just told no yesterday on one of the bills from one of my Republican colleagues, which was very, very unfortunate. So we do need that. That's why I'm making this big push and appeal for all of you, and you know, to make those connections with some of the more conservative legislators. And you can look and see the committee makeups and the membership of the committees too online. You can do a quick Google search for Minnesota Senate Environmental Policy Committee or something like that, or Energy Committee or Agriculture Committee. And you can look at the members who are on that committee and then specifically, you know, look at their districts, try to figure out, or you can contact our office too, or the friends. We can help you determine, you know, if there are some networking that can be done to try to meet with those particular senators, or talk with people who live in their districts who can then meet with them. But we got to make this big push to get that shift happening within the Conservative Party and within those quarters in Minnesota that consider themselves to be more conservative, and really appeal to that conservation ethic and that and the conservative ethic. Frankly, it's a conservative task, right, to try and make a good plan into the next decades to make sure that your children and your grandchildren and the generations to come are going to have enough clean water. I mean, that's actually a good planning, good governance that hopefully the Republicans will eventually come through on. So thanks to everybody so much for asking me to join today. It's been a real pleasure.
Well, thank you, Senator McEwen. Thank you for Amanda, and thank you, Representative Morrison, who's now at the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources hearing right now. But most of all, thank all of you here. As Amanda mentioned, this is really citizen action by contacting your legislators. It's also about legislative leadership that Senator McEwen and Representative Morrison represented as well. But again, it's all about you participating. And we at Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness know that the strength of our organization is based on all of you and how you participate. So we're a people-based organization, a people-centered organization, and we're very grateful for all of you that are watching today and will watch this on replay. So again, thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Senator McEwen. And thank you, my colleagues, Maya Swope, for placing those things in the chat, and my colleague, Scott Beauchamp, as well. So it's really a team effort here at Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness, and we're very grateful. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you so very much. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.